Next to the new questions around the investigation into the death of Jeffrey Epstein, the accused trafficker stunning the world, taking his own life in a Manhattan jail cell. The official autopsy results just announced by the medical examiner and what his legal team is vowing tonight.
What many believed was the final chapter of the Epstein scandal now appears unfinished. Long after the headlines faded, Paris Hilton has resurfaced in newly released material in a way that has reignited scrutiny. This time, the name does not appear as a passing reference or distant association, but within documents suggesting deeper proximity to a network that investigators say continued operating quietly for years afterward.
Receipt.
This just broke moments ago. The Democrats on the House Oversight Committee have released photos from Jeffrey Epstein's estate. We're getting dribs and drabs of this, and we had some pictures already, and here's some. There are some that show Donald Trump, Bill Clinton, Steve Bannon, Bill Gates, and others. None of the released images depicts any sexual misconduct. None is believed to depict underage girls. It was not immediately clear when or where they were taken or by whom.
The U.S. Department of Justice has released more than 300,000 pages tied to the late convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. These files include flight logs, photographs, internal communications, and grand jury testimony, much of it still heavily redacted. While no single document offers a complete picture, the cumulative effect has raised new questions about individuals whose names appear repeatedly across timelines, locations, and witness accounts. Within that context, Hilton's name stands out due to frequency and placement.
Again, there was new names in some of the emails that I think investigators need to look at. In particular, I jumped on the name of a modeling agent who, in a similar fashion to Jean-Luc Brunel, who brought underage girls from overseas to Jeffrey Epstein for abuse. There was another man. What was interesting about this other individual is that he also apparently provided young models for Donald Trump's modeling agency.
The documents do not merely reference social overlap. They outline connections that suggest awareness, access, and proximity to individuals at the center of the operation. Legal analysts caution that mention alone does not equal wrongdoing, yet acknowledge that repeated appearances in sensitive records often trigger renewed investigative interest. The focus, according to observers, is no longer limited to historical conduct. Attention has shifted toward what may have been concealed afterward, and why certain relationships were never fully examined.
Apparently not everything. We've got indications from the Department of Justice that there are things that are going to be withheld, at least, or handed out at a later date. Now, the law in this case that was passed by Congress and signed by President Trump required that all the Epstein files be released by midnight tonight, Friday, December 19th.
Some breaking news right now. Disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein has taken his own life while he was behind bars here in New York City. Epstein was facing trafficking charges.
That tension escalated following a recent high-profile interview, when familiar narratives were repeated just as federal disclosures quietly reopened doors many believed permanently closed. The claims were dismissed casually, brushed aside with practiced ease. Paris Hilton stated she did not recall ever meeting Ghislaine Maxwell, despite long-standing allegations that Maxwell once identified Hilton as a potential target for Jeffrey Epstein. That denial might have ended the conversation if not for the photographic record.
Hidden.
The Justice Department has finally released some of the highly anticipated Epstein files. More than 300,000 pages of documents related to the late convicted sex offender were made public today. They include photos, flight logs, grand jury testimony, and a lot of heavy redactions.
A 2000 image from the Ann and John fashion show in New York places a 19-year-old Hilton standing directly between Maxwell and Donald Trump. The image captures proximity, access, and familiarity, all frozen in a moment that now carries far more weight than it once did. With the latest tranche of Epstein-related documents released, the photograph has shifted from social snapshot to evidentiary reference point.
I want to know how Epstein made the money that he did. I want to know what the transactions are he was involved in. And that should all be something that the Treasury Department, the FBI can get access to, because in the meantime, what we're left with is Ghislaine Maxwell effectively downplaying this whole thing. Yeah, he was a he hid it from everybody. Nobody else was involved. There's no proof of anything else. There's no blackmail. There's no foreign intelligence tie.
Members of the House Oversight Committee have since released additional images recovered from Epstein's properties. These include photographs of Trump, Bill Clinton, Bill Gates, and other high-profile figures. Officials emphasize that none of the images depict criminal activity or underage individuals. Still, their existence reinforces how extensive Epstein's access to power truly was, and how deeply his network intersected with elite circles. The timing of these releases has intensified scrutiny.
We've seen dozens of new photos we haven't seen before of Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell with very high-profile people, celebrities, people like Mick Jagger and Michael Jackson, like you showed, also like British royalty and actors. All of that we sort of knew was happening. I'm going to highlight specifically two for the public interest, and that is President Clinton and President Trump.
To these girls, and that she knew that they were underage. How do you just have this be so one-sided? It is... I mean, it's such a miscarriage of justice. This is not what justice is supposed to look like. It's just, it's incredibly disappointing.
Just days earlier, the Department of Justice made public thousands of investigative pages, some still redacted. Among them was a 1996 FBI complaint linked to Maria Farmer, one of the first individuals to alert authorities. Her account confirms institutional awareness decades ago, raising a pressing question. Who else was present when those warnings were ignored? Against that backdrop, claims of forgotten encounters now collide with documented history. The records may not prove misconduct, but they challenge narratives of distance, coincidence, and selective memory.
Spoiler alert, season 2 is on the way, so in the end, he obviously didn't himself. Just like Jeffrey Epstein. Shut up! I know he's your friend, but I don't care.
Christopher Mason, the composer featured in the 2020 docuseries Surviving Jeffrey Epstein, did not present speculation without context. Mason described a specific moment in which Ghislaine Maxwell was actively scanning a room for young women, stopped on Paris Hilton, and allegedly stated she would be perfect for Jeffrey. According to Mason, a close friend present that night later confirmed hearing the same remark, reinforcing the consistency of the account. That detail complicates later public dismissals. When Hilton characterized the allegations as exaggerated attention-seeking, labeling herself convenient clickbait, the contrast became striking. The issue was no longer memory versus rumor, but denial versus corroborated testimony. The central question shifted from whether the encounter was recalled to whether forgetting had become a strategy shaped by time, distance, and public fatigue.
The news is breaking right now from the New York Times on Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein. They think they've got him this time. They've really got him this time. Here are some highlights. Hold on a second. My team's sending me the name of the article. It's Don's Best Friend: How Epstein and Trump Bonded Over the Pursuit of Women. And Left-Wing X is going nuts over what's in this article right now.
At the same time, newly released materials continued expanding the scope of the Epstein network. This week, Democrats on the House Oversight Committee disclosed emails attributed to Jeffrey Epstein himself, suggesting that Donald Trump was aware of the presence of young women. Reporting from the New York Times highlighted renewed scrutiny of the relationship, describing prolonged social overlap at Epstein-owned properties. Trump's representatives dismissed the reporting as selectively framed and politically motivated. However, the timing intensified attention. Trump had previously referred to Epstein as a terrific guy and socialized with him at Mar-a-Lago, yet more recently stated indifference toward the release of Epstein-related files. That stance collided with the administration missing its own legal deadline to disclose the remaining documents. As delays mount and details surface incrementally, questions surrounding intent, awareness, and omission continue to sharpen. Whether coincidence or calculated restraint, the pattern has become increasingly difficult to separate from consequence. Then came the photographs, the ones left unredacted and impossible to explain away. Bill Clinton appearing in a hot tub alongside Ghislaine Maxwell. Michael Jackson photographed near Diana Ross in Jeffrey Epstein's social orbit. Woody Allen, Larry Summers, and Prince Andrew all surfaced in the same visual record. Every figure denied wrongdoing. Every figure appeared present. The Department of Justice claimed no political names were obscured, yet more than 500 pages returned fully blacked out, entire sections erased, entire stories silenced. The governing law required all unclassified Epstein material to be released by December 19th. That deadline passed. What followed instead were staggered disclosures, withheld grand jury transcripts, and silence dressed up as compliance. The resurfaced birthday book intensified the unease. Epstein's 50th birthday scrapbook, filled with notes, sketches, and coded admiration from powerful associates, included a drawing of a nude torso signed Donald, accompanied by the line, "We have certain things in common." Donald Trump's representatives denied authorship, handwriting debates followed, but context mattered more than penmanship. These circles operated on implication, familiarity, and unspoken rules. Newly released images from Little St. James added another layer. A dentist-style chair positioned beneath masks on the wall, chalkboards marked with words like deception and power, flight manifests documenting repeated travel to the island where survivors later described systematic abuse. Analysts emphasized two figures of heightened public interest, Clinton and Trump, whose proximity to Epstein now carried renewed weight. One line from the birthday book echoed louder than the rest, "Enigmas never age." Years later, Epstein emailed Maxwell describing Trump as the dog that hasn't barked. Maxwell replied that the thought lingered. Meaning remained unresolved. Answers likely sat inside unreleased files. Additional names surfaced: Bill Gates, Richard Branson, Chris Tucker, and Kevin Spacey, who publicly called for full disclosure to clear his name. Presence alone raised questions about risk, knowledge, and silence. Disturbing references to Lolita imagery deepened the cultural implications. Quotes traced onto women's bodies. First editions displayed like trophies. Emails referenced modeling agents accused of trafficking minors, some connected to agencies supplying talent to Trump-linked ventures. The pattern suggested infrastructure, not coincidence. This was no longer about isolated behavior. It exposed a culture sustained by access, silence, and protection. Power shielding power. Survivors like Maria Farmer now reviewed records proving federal awareness decades earlier. The files were not relics. They were active evidence, and the struggle over their release continued in real time. Right now, Paris Hilton is watching a carefully constructed public image strain under the weight of a single photograph and a composer's sworn testimony. At the same time, inside the heavily redacted pages of the Epstein files, there are still names unseen, names belonging to people who believed exposure would never reach them, no matter how long the record remained sealed. Analysts have long warned that operations like Jeffrey Epstein's were rarely isolated. They functioned as closed ecosystems designed to attract high-profile, ultra-wealthy individuals with guarantees of discretion. The pitch was simple and effective: complete privacy, total protection, and the promise that whatever happened inside those walls would never escape them. That assurance became the product. So when Hilton says there is no memory, the implication is less about forgetting and more about refusal. And when Donald Trump dismisses the files as a hoax, the subtext sounds like an appeal for continued silence. But silence is no longer an option. The documents exist, the photographs exist, the emails exist. Epstein's world has always shown that the truth does not disappear. It waits. This moment matters because the next release is not hypothetical. It is already unfolding. If earlier disclosures cracked foundations, the unreleased material could destabilize entire structures. As more files are examined, it becomes clear Epstein's operation was not random misconduct. It was a system, and systems depend on rules. One rule dominated above all else. Silence was not just protection, it was currency. Financial records reinforce that reality. Epstein did not merely associate with powerful figures. He funded them, leveraged them, and in some cases, maintained influence over them. Following the money reveals repeated names appearing across transactions, charities, trusts, and shell arrangements. These patterns look less coincidental and more transactional. Attention now returns to the 50th birthday book, a scrapbook filled with coded messages from the elite. Beyond the widely discussed sketch attributed to Trump, other entries raise quieter questions. A note from Bill Clinton appears unremarkable at first glance, yet its presence alone prompts scrutiny. Why was it there? And why were so many willing to leave traces inside a book meant for a man who thrived on secrets? Bill Clinton's representatives have spent years emphasizing that any connection to Jeffrey Epstein was limited and incidental. Yet Clinton's presence inside Epstein's personal birthday collection places him alongside imagery and messaging that raises uncomfortable questions about what circulated within those elite social circles. The inclusion itself contradicts claims of distance and reinforces how closely these worlds overlapped. Another image continues to draw attention, a photograph depicting Epstein presenting a $22,500 check to Donald Trump, signed with a flourish, and accompanied by the caption, "Early talents with money plus women." Framed as humor by defenders, the wording reads less like a joke and more like a self-aware summary of values shared inside those environments. Context matters, and this context is difficult to ignore. The financial web extends further through newly released flight logs. These records do more than document travel to Epstein's private island. They reveal repeated passenger patterns over time. Familiar names appear again, including Clinton, Kevin Spacey, and Chris Tucker. More notable, however, are the names previously hidden behind redactions, corporate executives, media power brokers, and technology magnates whose influence has historically shielded them from scrutiny. These logs do not merely suggest association, they demonstrate repetition. Repetition creates patterns, and patterns establish behavior. Complementing the logs are emails that have only recently come to light. In these exchanges, Epstein is not socializing casually but coordinating logistics. A 2011 message with a sitting governor references usual arrangements for an island visit, followed by a response promising discretion. Discretion in this context functioned less as privacy and more as insulation. It provided plausible deniability while enabling continued access. Within Epstein's network, discretion became a transactional asset, circulated repeatedly among those who relied on silence as protection. What makes the situation even more disturbing is that the files do not merely document who attended gatherings. They outline how the operation was protected. A 2006 memo from Jeffrey Epstein's legal team details strategies designed to neutralize potential whistleblowers through financial settlements and intimidation. This was not rumor or speculation. It was an operational blueprint, and it functioned effectively for years. With the right attorneys' influence and leverage, damaging information was not only buried, it was systematically erased from public view. Little St. James itself emerges as more than a private retreat. The latest document release confirms it operated as a central hub. Newly revealed guest ledgers list repeated visits by politicians, celebrities, and influential figures known publicly for moral posturing or advocacy. These records track frequency, not just presence. When cross-referenced with flight logs, the consistency forms an unmistakable pattern that cannot be dismissed as coincidence. Equally revealing are the gaps in the record. Entire grand jury transcripts remain fully blacked out, including a 119-page document and a separate 255-page stretch with no readable content at all. The Department of Justice claims victim protection as justification, yet the scale of redaction has drawn criticism from lawmakers, including Chuck Schumer, who publicly questioned whether transparency obligations are being violated. The files also demonstrate that Epstein's network did not dissolve after his 2019 arrest. Email chains show continued communication involving elected officials and media executives discussing damage control in the months before his death. These were not historical remnants. They were active connections. This environment thrived because of a broader culture that rewarded silence. Influence excused misconduct, and reputations were shielded through power. This context reframes figures like Paris Hilton not as isolated names, but as examples of how individuals were absorbed into a system where exit carried consequences. Systems like this eventually fracture. With each new document release, the illusion of permanence weakens, and the unanswered question grows louder. What remains hidden in the files still sealed?